are you seeing fatigue getting a very big issue?
And what a person needs to recognize and understand is you may feel fatigued, but exercise can actually potentially be a way out of that. This is setting us up for failure is actually the individuals who are in sort of the corporate sphere and multinational companies or entrepreneurial setups, etc. And the first realization that we have to give to everyone, including those who are watching this program, is that you cannot separate the physical from the mental. Both of these are intertwined. Maybe the hashtag for this conversation is longevity or well-being above the neck, which is how do we better take care of our brain and our mind.
So welcome everyone to Beyond the Couch. We are here yet with another great episode. I know it's going to be very special because today we're going to talk about a very rare topic. We're combining two interesting things together. And before I do that, I want to set the stage with some important statistics, very recent research that WHO released just last week. They have updated the mental health disorders and the mental health numbers worldwide. And what comes out of it is that more than 1 billion people today are living with a mental health disorder, most of it being contributed by depression and anxiety. And these are just the reported numbers. What WHO also claims is that a lot of it is still unreported. And the second aspect is these are people who actually have mental health disorders. So if today someone is saying that I have overthinking issue, I'm worrying a lot, or people who have not been clinically diagnosed are actually not covered under this spectrum. So that's the first part. The second interesting thing and why I'm mentioning this statistic is because we are talking today to Dr. Marcus, and with all his achievements and his research and everything that he's doing with the human edge, I think this stat particularly makes a lot of sense. And what it says is that mental disorders today are the second leading cause of years with disability in the world. So what we call YLD. So mental disorder is accounting for 1 in 6 YLD. And again, depression and anxiety is the highest contributor. And when we look at the demographic, we see that people between the age of 20 to 29 are the most affected by that, right? And another interesting thing is that 1 in 100 deaths that happen today, 1 in 100 deaths is because of suicide, right? So this is just to throw some light on how trivial or not is mental health becoming. And with that, Dr. Marcus, I'm going to arrive at my first question, that I have seen that beautiful definition of longevity that you have. And, I think you would be the best person to say it again. But I was looking at one of your podcasts where you said that there are two camps of people who define longevity. And the beautiful part about that was you said that when death comes to us, what's important is that are we going to be satisfied with the quality part of it? That did I live a very qualitative, healthy life? So my question here to you is that how do you see mental health playing a role in that, A? And because I think probably your answer will automatically combine this, but the B part to it is that why do we still not talk about mental health in these longevity conversations that we have? So the how and the why part of it, Dr. Marcus.
I don't know, actually. I mean, for me, it's strange. I can't extract mental well-being away from physical well-being when I think about my own day-to-day well-being. So much of the joy of life is because of the sentiment of how well the mind and the brain is over and above the physical characteristics and capabilities. And I completely agree with you, because when someone sees me and we go through their longevity dashboard, The primary indicators on that dashboard are various blood-based biomarkers or functional-based biomarkers or digital biomarkers, but they're very physical in its orientation. There's not so much focus that's happening above the neck in terms of what's happening for brain and sort of emotional well-being as well. So I'm really happy that we can have this type of conversation, and it might inspire people out there for their own sense of self as well. As you were alluding to, just so that the audience is very clear, as a longevity physician, my metric of success is not your lifespan curve, i.e., how many years am I adding to your physical life? It's actually the health span gradient, which is how joyous, how healthy, how vital, how well lived are those years that we have been blessed to be able to enjoy, and how do we maximize the outcome of that? And of course, therefore, in addition to the physical attributes, the mental well-being and the emotional well-being are key into that aspect. So great setup, and I'm excited for where this conversation goes.
Thanks, Dr. Marcus. So now my next question is, because you mentioned about how the dashboard, shows us the matrix, and I came across the work that Human Edge is doing. This might already be happening or not happening, and of course, I would love some scientific, medical visibility, and very curious on this. That our biomarkers, are our blood tests, telling a story about our mental health and about our emotional well-being?
Short answer, no. Now, we can sort of intellectualize this as much as we want and try to come up with permutations around this, but I accept it's a shortcoming. Certainly something that all of us, including myself, needs to be much more considerate around. When I work through a framework with any individual, irrespective of their background, they could be an IPL cricketer, they could be an Olympian, they could be an entrepreneur, they could be a homemaker. I always focus on the 5 pillars: sleep, eat, move, breathe, and connect. And they all feed into each other. And the first 3 are much more physical or foundational in aspect, and breathe and connect probably make a lot more sense for this conversation today. Breathe is all about the relationship we have with stress. And I use the word relationship very purposefully because stress intrinsically or biologically is not a bad thing always. The human fight or flight response, which has evolved, is there for a very specific biological reason. It solves a problem. And actually, it's the opportunity that the body has to grow from that position where we can become a better version of ourselves. And so the relationship we have with good stress, creating more opportunities for good stress in our lives, and then allowing the body to recover and heal from that good stress so that it can become a better version is critical. And there's specific biomarkers for that. We can measure blood cortisol levels in the morning. We can measure heart rate variability data from the sort of the sleep rings and the fitness bands, etc. We can do sort of lifestyle-based questionnaires where you're asking people about various facets of their life and they can objectively quantify them, etc. So there are ways of sort of quantifying that, but that's the breathe pillar, which is really important. And the last pillar in this is connect. And connection is a very deep one. Connection is about how I connect with myself, how I connect with the other people around me. So the relationships that I have with my family, my peers, my friends, etc. And how I connect with the world around me as well, with nature, with technology, and creating the right boundaries in the lens of technology and breaking down the boundaries when it comes through nature as well. Because oftentimes we find that if we're able to enhance the physical connections that we have around us with people, with places, and the world, we add a layer of well-being and joy, which you can't quantify in the traditional sense as well. So fewer biomarkers on that front, but definitely a very important aspect from a longevity perspective as well. And lastly, I would say then maybe connecting the dots to longevity specifically, maybe we'll go into this later on. There are some specific conditions which increase in probability as we get older. cardiometabolic disease is one, but neurodegenerative disorders are another big facet. In India, our population above the age of 60 is on the verge of explosion over the next 2 or 3 decades. I think we have about 10 million people in India around that age, and that's going to intensify and grow. And with them, the disorders like dementia, which there are many causes that create them, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, vascular dementia, cognitive decline. All of these are important, and they're things that we can measure and intervene early and create a healthy trajectory for people as well. So this is sort of how I would approach the problem.
Got it, Dr. Marcus. So that's where I have a follow-up from here, because like you said, that as we grow older, and we were also doing a research because September is also the month of Alzheimer's. And what we're seeing on our end, like you rightly pointed, we have more and more cases that are coming in, not just after 50 years for neurodegenerative, but we're also seeing an early onset. So the follow-up here that I have for you is that, are there any proven, established comorbidities that come with mental health disorders?
No, absolutely many, because the causative agent behind the brain's health deteriorating could be multiple. Diabetes, for example, is a metabolic disease, is a metabolic burden. It's the cellular inability to metabolize and deal with sugar, and an excessive amount of what we call hyperglycemia, so an excessive amount of sugar in the blood. Now, the brain doesn't like to be exposed to high levels of sugar either. The blood-brain barrier's specific role is to maintain a very, very tight chemistry around the brain and within the brain substance as well. So metabolic disease is a big contributor, to the tune, actually, that some scientific studies are actually alluding to neurocognitive decline to be diabetes type 3. i.e., a metabolic linked directly to cellular dysfunction in the cerebral tissue of the brain, right? So that's one causative pathway that we know of. The other one is then the development of plaque. So, 20, 25 years ago, when I was in med school and beginning the journey of sort of that education, we were being taught around amyloid plaque as a buildup of accumulation of proteins within the brain, which could potentially lead to Alzheimer's disease. Now, there are more and more diagnostic tests available, which can be done simply by taking a person's blood sample, where there's an NF test. It's called neurofibrillary tangles test, that you can measure the concentration of certain proteins in the blood to give us an indication of how much. Some of these are still quite research tools, but the point is that the science is evolving and it's getting better. So we can have a look and understand how some of these processes might be worsening in the brain. There is a genetic test for ApoE, which is, again, a test that anyone can do. And the ApoE gene has been linked to the development of neurocognitive disease, particularly Alzheimer's disease. And if you have 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene, then you're more likely, I think 20 to 30 times more likely than the general population to develop. So these are sort of screening tests or diagnostic tests. Of course, there's imaging tests that can be done looking at the brain under MRI, fMRI, etc. So I think the repertoire of diagnostics available to us to either screen or intervene is becoming more readily available. And based on that data and information, people can then choose to make the right lifestyle-based indications or pharmaceutical-based interventions to manage that decline and that journey, so that they push out the disease for as long as possible.
Got it. Now, Dr. Marcus, if I was to simplify this a bit, and maybe let me just take an example. Let's say, I'm a 31-year-old, very sedentary lifestyle, but I'm getting more affected because of, I would say, stress at work, stress in relationships, a lot of overthinking, all of those things. But I do hold a desire to improve the quality of my health, of course, of my life, and also increase my health span. Now, in a case like that, where I'm getting more affected with something to do with my emotional health and mental health
Yeah.
rather than my physical health, what would we say to a person like that? How and what can they do to improve their longevity in that case? Or what is the kind of lifestyle you would start recommending to them?
And let me just say, I see this every single day because the single biggest audience that I've had the opportunity of working with over the last many years is actually the individuals who are in sort of the corporate sphere and multinational companies or entrepreneurial setups, etc. And the first realization that we have to give to everyone, including those who are watching this program, is that, again, going back to your first question, is that you cannot separate the physical from the mental. Both of these are intertwined with one another. So the act of studying an individual's sleep duration quality is as important to dealing with or preventing that burnout as is the intervention of some form of cognitive behavioral therapy or psychological intervention as well. So I always start with sleep, and that's why it's the first of my 5 pillars, because sleep is nature's tool to allow the body to perform higher, to live longer, to be better, etc. It's a period of recovery and growth. It's a period of repair as well. So the duration of sleep, the quality of sleep, the different phases of sleep. I don't want to go too technical, but people who are using the devices will be able to see for themselves how they spend time in rapid eye movement or REM sleep, how much time they spend in deep sleep, how much time they spend in light sleep. And each of those have got particular thresholds which the body must have at a minimum for the recovery process to happen. So sleep is really important. And then creating a lifestyle to optimize for sleep is critical. Frequency, the time of night you go to bed, the circadian rhythm optimization, supplementation, food, all these types of things. So sleep would be the first stop. The second stop would, believe it or not, be how the body is fueling itself. Because quite often, people who are in a high stressed state inevitably gravitate towards food items which are more negatively impactful for their body than doing good. It's a natural response. The body automatically starts to produce leptin and ghrelin, and it secretes more insulin in terms of resistance patterns. And we find that people preferentially reach out for fried fatty foods, trans fats, or high sugary, high glycemic types of foods. It's a stress response. Because if you think about nature's preservation, if I was being chased down by a saber-toothed tiger, my body needs to have enough glucose availability so that my muscles don't run out of fuel and I can outrun. Therefore, we gravitate towards high energy items. The same thing is happening, but this time the trigger is not a physical threat. It's an innocuous mental model that we've created for ourselves, such as having a bad call with a client or a customer, etc. But the internal drive is still the same. We're still these sort of Neanderthalic cave men and women that are just living in a modern 21st century world. Our biology hasn't kept up with that sort of evolution. So retraining the individual to understand this pattern of recognition and then helping them choose better fueling choices, which are higher in good fats, higher in protein, higher in fiber, less in glycemic index in terms of carbs and processed foods and high fructose corn syrup type of foods, etc. This is very helpful. It's also great for the microbiome because it'll heal the organisms that live inside of the gut so that they produce the right types of end products, short chain fatty acids, etc., which the brain needs for its neurochemistry. And then the last in sort of that physical paradigm is move, which again is nature's healing. I mean, we secrete BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which basically does what it says on the tin, which is it allows the brain to grow, neurotrophic. It allows the brain to grow, and it's secreted when the body is in an exercise state, zone to exercise. So a walk, a jog, a cycle ride, a swim, these are all great states. If you're doing resistance training, your muscles are actually producing myokines where they're secreting chemicals into the bloodstream, which make their way into the brain and can actually heal the brain and mitigate long-term neurodegenerative disorders and diseases as well. So movement is very, very important as well. So even before we get to the toolkit of sort of psychological intervention, there's a lot that can happen at the baseline foundation of quote unquote physical health so that they can deal with their stress and their burnout much, much better.
Got it. Dr. Marcus, you talked about movement, right?
Yeah.
Moving a lot, and that forms a very critical pillar out of the five things that you talked about. I am I'm going to take like a very realistic view here, which
Mhm.
is most of the people that we see today, like we're doing about, I would say in a day, we're doing about 350 to 400 therapies, people who are coming and seeing our therapist. And
Yep.
surprisingly, the biggest thing that most of them are coming for is fatigue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they basically say, I don't have the energy to do this A, B. And in that case, when you want to make someone understand the importance of movement, it becomes very difficult. So, A, do you align with that? Are you seeing fatigue getting a very big issue? And second, if yes, then how are we scientifically reading that? What do we say that medically? Where is that coming from? Or why is that happening? And how do we translate that for us to understand that, hey, this is the reason of fatigue?
In the medical clinic, we hear the word energy, but it's two sides of the same coin, right? It's about 80 to 90% of people who I see, their most common complaint is, I don't have the energy to do X, or I don't feel as energetic as I was a few years ago, etc. So it's very much the same. Now, the cause of that energy decline and the fatigue can have multiple reasons. It could be a micronutrient deficiency in some individuals. 90% of Indians are D and B deficient, iron deficient, especially in women. And all of these micronutrients can enhance the fatigue levels or reduce the energy levels. It could be a hormonal problem. 25% of everyone I see have subclinical thyroid or androgen related challenges. This could be Hashimoto thyroiditis, autoimmune condition from the gut, causing a reduction in thyroid secretion. It could be low testosterone levels. It could be low estrogen and progesterone levels in perimenopausal women, etc. So there's a lot of that sort of hormonal decline that we see. So that's another big category. Cardiometabolic conditioning is a third major category. About 65 to 70% of Indians have some form of cardiometabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, diabetes type 2, fatty liver disease, and then hypercholesterolemia or dyslipidemia with hypertension. These are all part of the same essential spectrum, which is where the body is not metabolizing fuel properly, laying it down in places it shouldn't be, like in the liver or in the heart or in the brain, and therefore leading to these secondary consequences and side effects and diseases as well. These are big problems that we see. So all I'm saying is that energy is the big buzzword. There are multiple channels sort of leading into why that might be the case. And what a person needs to recognize and understand is you may feel fatigued, but exercise can actually potentially be a way out of that, because exercise puts a positive effort on the body. And actually, the benefits of exercise over a period of time will naturally make you feel more energetic and more full of life than you were to begin with. So we can start simply with basic levels of movement. It could be something as simple as housework. It could be walking the dog. It could be dancing with your children. It could be going for a walk with your spouse, partner, or colleague at work. And then as the habituation of that sort of behavioral pattern tends to stick and the person becomes more confident, then we can layer in more intense forms of movement for the individual, which are more holistic. So there's an aerobic component, an anaerobic component, a strength training component, etc., etc.
Got it. Dr. Marcus, I'm now going to take this view to, the Indian ecosystem. And again, I have learned a lot personally when you shared about, previously in a lot of your talks, you have shared about the status of diabetes, our country, of course, literally walking into a healthcare disaster.
Yeah.
I think that's how you define it. So I don't intend to sort of repeat that. But what I would love to understand is that if there were, let's say, three things that you would want to recommend to make the Indian healthcare system better from a 360-degree perspective, what would you say? Where we are giving enough view to physical healthcare also, to mental healthcare also, and to all aspects. What would you say will it take?
Number one would be increase the public infrastructure available to move more day to day. We don't have enough opportunities for people who want to move to actually move. It's impossible to walk to work. It's becoming increasingly harder to just go down for an evening walk because of our roads and our constructions and all of those things. And if we look at models around the world, take Singapore, where you are right now. Singapore is now officially a blue zone. It has graduated to that class where there's a high proportion of its local inhabitants living to be 100 years and beyond. And that has been a very purposeful plan by the Singaporean government over the last decade or so, and a massive amount of investment is to come. But these day-to-day interventions are hugely important. And of course, all the gardens and parks and walking routes and cycling routes and all of that has played a big role in allowing Singaporeans to just move more day to day, right? Improving mass transport systems and public transport systems, etc. So that would be the first thing that we need to do. The second would be really looking at the quality of food which is available to people in this country. The quality of food has significantly declined over the last 20, 30 years. We have a hyper availability of fast food, and the basic staples are reducing in the goodness of what is actually been in them, starting with the quality of the soil. The soil doesn't have the micronutrients. The micronutrients won't make its way into the plants. It won't make its way into the food chain. And ultimately, it won't make its way back to us. So I think the second major emphasis has to be on the quality of food that we make available for the people in the country. And the third is really looking at our definition of success, because we are creating an economy which celebrates the convenience culture above everything else. We have platforms available today where I can get any calorie delivered to my door in 10 minutes or less. And by the way, we celebrate that because venture capital money, private equity money, investor money goes behind that. We buy stocks and shares in those businesses. We celebrate the returns in that sort of Dalal Street capitalization, etc. And if we keep going down that path of delivering of everything and being able to go anywhere without stepping out of your door, and technology being so immersive that we never need to physically meet another human being ever again, this is setting us up for failure in the long run, because we are social mammals. We crave the connections of other human beings. We crave the connections with nature. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to feel soil again. It's part of our biosphere. There are all of these basic things which are important. And none of those are really health related from what you may be asked. I didn't describe hospitals. I didn't describe diagnostics. I didn't describe generic medicines or biosimilars. I think we need to focus on the basics first, because we're such a large country. That's the only way to fix the system, is to really prevent the problems occurring in the first place.
Very nicely put. I love the term convenience culture. And I'm also glad that I'm not the only one, because when we talk to our stakeholders, the examples that we are given are of quick commerce today. That, look at how this is growing, and the kind of voice we have to have is that, hey, this is very much against of what a human being needs today. So thank you for that, Dr. Marcus. I just have two more questions, and then we'll be able to conclude this conversation. We every day there are India's, I think, producing a lot of healthcare founders, and there are a lot who have ideas, who are probably wanting to build, who want to make an impact. In your view, what could be, and now I think this is more to do with very specific problems, healthcare problems. What would you encourage budding entrepreneurs to pick up? What are 2 to 3 problems you would encourage them to pick up and build a business around?
I think there are many, because the diversity on the scale of what we're facing is so large. India is a country of many populations. I can't remember the economist who I was listening to, but he was basically describing there's a Switzerland of India, there is a Brazil of India, there is an Africa of India, etc. So point he was making is that the Indian population, from a economic, socio-economic perspective, is actually one of different layers. You've got the top 1 million, then the 10 million, then the 100 million, and then the 1 billion. And each of them have very specific problems to solve for. And I think budding entrepreneurs can pick a segment and go after that specifically, because each of them will need solutions which are delivered differently from the others. So that's sort of one way of looking at the problem. I think the other way of looking at the problem is that, again, in terms of our sort of scale of diversity, we're a young country. That is true. We have the world's largest, youngest population. I think our average age right now is about 29 years old, or half the population is under the age of 29 or so. So there's clearly a lot that can be done for the young Indians, for entrepreneurs to solve for. Then you have a growing group of individuals who are maybe in my bracket, the early 40s. And now with the disposable income, the awareness through social media, the connection with the global north and the west, and the expectation of some of those solutions and services to be provided here. And in that, I look at women's health like perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, men health with low testosterone values, etc. So there are some age-related changes which will happen to a person in this particular category. So that could potentially be solved for. And then you have the silver economy of people above the age of 60. And that's just going to grow and grow and grow. They'll need assisted services at home. They'll need a different type of healthcare infrastructure for them. Their families will need information and support about them, particularly with children living in other parts of the world. So I think it's a really exciting time for an entrepreneur and a founder, especially with the technology that we have available in the country. I think it's just about ensuring that they pick the problem, the population, and then go after and solve for the solution.
Great. Dr. Marcus, would it be okay if I make a reference to one of your TED Talks? You had delivered it, I think, about 7 years ago.
Sure.
And you had talked about the future of healthcare, and you were referencing to the year 2030. And I remember that in that talk, you had talked about that how in a OT, it's actually going to be all the machines who would be doing the work, and we would just have one doctor, a human being, just for an emergency purpose. We are about 6-7 years when you had done that talk, and when you had visualized something so futuristic like that, especially in the Indian context. How do you see the role of technology picking up? If you could just give some examples, maybe from a human edge perspective also, how fast do you think that's happening? And has that view now changed for the coming 5 years? How do you see that evolving?
I think the timeline stays around the same. Maybe what I suggested for 2030 may actually happen in 2028 or so. I think, none of us had any idea about LLMs or ChatGPT or any of those things. Yeah, you're right. I gave the talk in 2017 or 18. And so it's amazing to see how things have spanned out the way they have. I think in India specifically, even the work that we've been doing at our own small level is really taking the decision-making tree that a doctor, physician makes in our clinic and writing it as a script which can analyze biomarkers in real time and make real-world suggestions to individuals, keeping the doctor in the loop almost as a co-pilot, but allowing for scale and accessibility. Because I think that's a really powerful way of impacting India, because we have the largest population, but amongst the smallest number of healthcare professionals, particularly in your field, actually. In mental health professionals, there are so few compared to the burden of the disease. So if we're able to utilize these tools to enhance access, driving down the affordability for it, and particularly for a country like India, where we're not an English speaking country, but we have these many hundreds of vernacular languages with each of their own cultures, with individuals who aren't text savvy, but much more voice savvy as the first interface layer. I think when I say we, I mean the Indian entrepreneurial technology ecosystem can potentially build these types of capabilities and tools to really help people all the way down to the last mile, and leapfrogging the infrastructure and the manpower deficits that we have just because of the population size that we have.
Amazing. Very helpful, Dr. Marcus. I think contextualizing that part that you said, because no one expected LLMs to come so soon. And I think context also plays a huge role now. Because I was just reading a very interesting thing which came out of the Human Edge itself, that how you guys are contextualizing using technology for, especially for peak performers, for high performers. And what resonated for me over there was that probably I still feel I'm someone that when I'm in my 60s or 50s, I don't want to ever stop. I want to keep working at the pace that I'm working, because that gives me a lot of mental satisfaction. And
Yeah.
what would it take to have that at that point of time, So really great insights. Anything from your end, Dr. Marcus, as your last thought on this particular thing, especially on longevity and the talks about mental health? Anything from your end?
No, I think what this has actually made me realize more in our conversation today is that when we think about well-being and longevity, we typically are describing a situation of below the neckline. And maybe the hashtag for this conversation is longevity or well-being above the neck, which is how do we better take care of our brain and our mind to enjoy everything we need to in a long, healthy life.
Yeah. Very nicely put. Thank you for that. Thank you, Dr. Marcus.